I knew exactly when the moment snapped, when every man in that room understood I'd been publicly humiliated and chose to pretend I didn't notice. It was subtle but surgical, the kind of disrespect you can't call out without looking petty, but deep enough that it stains you. It started with Rachel's hand. She pulled it away from mine the second the photographer stepped near our table. Not quickly, smoothly, like it had never been there, like I was just a friend of her father's tagging along. She turned her full body toward Logan when he came over. He touched the small of her back like it was muscle memory. Familiar, claimed. She didn't flinch, just kept laughing, hand to his forearm like some sort of parody of workplace intimacy. He leaned in close to her ear and said something that made her grip his wrist as she giggled. I didn't hear it. I didn't have to. When he looked over and caught me watching, he gave me that millennial half-smirk. Sir, he nodded. Always a pleasure. Then turned right back around and said, Ratch, did you try the champagne at table 9 yet? Come on. I'll grab you one. Ratch. Not Rachel. Like I wasn't sitting 2 feet away with my name printed on the same place card. And nobody said a thing. I used to design security infrastructure. I built server rooms for half the hedge funds in Manhattan. I once led a team that quietly identified and removed a $40 million embezzlement loop before it made headlines. But tonight, I was just the quiet man in the corner with graying hair and a polite nod. It's funny, 97% of people who watch these stories never subscribe. Maybe they forget, maybe they just don't realize it helps. But if you've ever been in a room where no one sees you until it's too late, hit that button. It's the one small thing that motivates my team to keep going, quietly, steadily, behind the scenes. Anyway, dinner was served. Round tables, identical floral arrangements, waiters trained to be invisible. Rachel sat between me and Logan. She leaned toward him all night, crossed her legs in his direction, laughed at his every story. I heard her refer to him as her work twin. His hand brushed hers twice. She didn't pull away. When the toast started, Logan stood. No prompt. Just the smug confidence of a man who believes he owns the spotlight. I'd like to raise a glass, he said, already grinning. To Westbrook, where the old guard taught us how to build, and the new guard shows us how to thrive. And to the husbands who retired so their wives could finally shine. He gestured vaguely toward me. We stand on the shoulders of some very supportive men. Polite laughter. Rachel laughed hardest. I didn't smile. I didn't flinch. I just took a sip of the overpriced wine and looked straight at him. He looked away first. Later, as they posed for photos, I stood behind the crowd. Logan put his arm around Rachel's waist for one, then didn't move it. Her smile was wide, practiced. His was real. That's when the camera clicked. I slipped away before dessert. No drama, no argument. Just told the valet to bring my car early and drove home in silence. Rachel didn't even notice I left until after midnight. When she walked in, heels in her hand, she said, "Oh, I thought you were mingling with the investors." I said, "I'm not part of the power team anymore, remember?" She rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic." But I wasn't. I was being deliberate. Because what Logan didn't know was that the infrastructure he walked on, the actual software backbone of their donation tracking, their internal audit chains, their digital compliance keys, wasn't just inspired by my work. It was my work. They'd modernized the UI, slapped a prettier dashboard on it. But the bones? The encrypted audit trail function? That was mine. And every system has its weak points. The trick is knowing where to look. Logan thought I was background noise, a retired husband past his prime. But I wasn't done. And he just told the wrong man that I didn't matter. 2 days later, the photo dropped like a wet rag across my face. Company Instagram post. Black and white filter. Their heads tilted toward each other. Her hand resting lightly on his chest like it belonged there. His arms snug around her waist. Fingers splayed like he'd done it 100 times. The caption read, "The real power team. High voltage." I stared at it for a full minute. Not in rage. Not even surprise. Just confirmation. Rachel didn't tag me. Of course not. But she hearted the post. Commented with a lightning bolt and champagne glass emoji. A few of her coworkers chimed in. Dynamic duo. Westbrook's secret weapons. Fire, fire, fire. One guy joked, "Careful, HR's watching winking face." She replied, "Haha, let them." When I asked her about it over coffee that morning, I kept it measured. No accusations. Just a slow sip and, "That post with Logan. Interesting caption." She didn't even look up from her phone. He's just being playful. You know how he is. I let that hang. Waited for her to follow it up with anything, reassurance, clarification, hell, even deflection. But nothing. Just moved on to scrolling emails and asked if I'd remembered to pick up paper towels. That's when I stopped asking and started watching. The texts came next. She got more guarded with her phone, but not enough. People like Logan, they don't operate in silence. They want to be seen, felt, worshipped. Narcissists don't cheat in the dark. They cheat brightly. It started with the late-night laughs in the kitchen. I'd be upstairs reading and hear her on speakerphone downstairs, whispering like a teenager. Sometimes she'd throw in a loud, "That's inappropriate," with a laugh that made it clear she wasn't offended. Then there were the meetings. So many meetings. Tuesday nights, Thursday nights, the occasional Sunday strategy session at some rooftop wine bar. When I offered to drive her once, she said, "No, we're carpooling. It's easier." I asked, "We?" She said, "Logan and me. It's just more efficient. Why do you always read into things?" I didn't reply. There was a Saturday she didn't come home until 2 a.m. She'd forgotten her charger at the office. I didn't ask why she smelled like spiced cologne and had a hotel logo napkin folded in her coat pocket. I just noted it, quietly. One night, I brought it up, flat tone. "You sure you're comfortable with how this looks?" She turned on the faucet and started washing a wine glass like I hadn't spoken. Then, without facing me, "You're just paranoid. It's all your work. You've gotten bored, right?" I said. "That must be it." She finally looked at me. "Seriously, Paul, you think there's something going on just because he's charming?" "Didn't say that." "Then stop acting like some jealous schoolboy. It's exhausting." I nodded, picked up my book, and walked out. That was the last time I gave her the chance to be honest. From then on, I studied patterns, rewatched company live streams. There was a quarterly review video. Rachel sitting beside Logan at the conference table, leaning in when he spoke, tapping his shoulder before she left the frame. It wasn't one thing. It was the accumulation. And then I found the ribbon. One night while gathering laundry from the floor, something she used to do for me once upon a time, I picked up a scarf, silk, black, branded with the name of a high-end hotel 2 counties over. We'd never been there, but the napkin in her coat 2 weeks ago? Same hotel. Still, I said nothing. Just folded it carefully and tucked it into the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. Not out of sentiment. As evidence. That's when it hit me. Logan wasn't just arrogant. He was reckless. And reckless people leave trails. So I started tracing them. Her corporate calendar? I set up a quiet sync. Her email? Easy enough to pull metadata from headers. Not to read it, that would be too direct. Too obvious. But to see when she was writing. Who she was writing to. The timing patterns. They spoke volumes. I even noticed Logan started tagging her in memes. Office-themed jokes about after-hours work and meetings that run long. One said, "Nothing like closing a deal under the stars," with a wink emoji. She commented, "Guilty face with tears of joy. Guilty." She typed it, publicly. And the thing about guilt is it's easier to trace than innocence. So I traced. Not with rage. Not with confrontation. With method. With structure. With patience. The kind of patience you learn when you spend 20 years designing fail-safes that never trip. Until they do. And when they do, it's because someone ignored the one blinking red light. Rachel ignored that light. Logan ripped the wires out. And me? I had the blueprints. The moment he put his hand on my shoulder, I knew he'd been drinking. Not the casual kind, either. This was the arrogant, sloppy kind. The kind where a man forgets he's still in public. Still in a room full of potential witnesses. Still speaking to someone who remembers things. The event was a product rollout. New app interface for the Westbrook donor platform. Sleek visuals, overused buzzwords, canapés nobody asked for. Rachel had been too swamped to come home and change, so she went straight from work. Logan, naturally, was already there, holding court like he was the one who invented digital currency. I stayed in the corner, glass of club soda in hand, not because I wanted to stay sober, but because I didn't want a single detail to blur. At some point during the night, Rachel disappeared, said she had to talk with legal. Logan didn't even wait 10 minutes before slinking toward me like a snake at closing time. He slapped the bar next to my drink, leaned in with that red-faced grin that only gets wider the more wrong he is. "You know," he said, swaying slightly, "she deserves better." I looked up. Sorry. He pointed at my glass. What is that, soda? You're not even trying tonight. I'm retired, I said. Trying stopped being part of the job description. He snorted. Exactly. You had your time. Now it's hers. And Christ, Paul, she's incredible. He paused like he expected me to disagree, or throw a punch, or at least blink. Instead, I smiled. Calmly. She is. That threw him. So he leaned closer, and that's when he said it. You really think you're the kind of guy she needs now? I mean, I saw your stack of books at the last event. Estate law? Come on, man. What's next? Cryptic crosswords and rotary phones. I didn't answer. I just swirled the ice in my glass and let him keep talking. Because what Logan didn't know, and wouldn't bother to ask, is that I wasn't researching estate law because I was bored. I was studying it because 3 years ago, Rachel came to me in a panic. Said her firm was shifting equity packages, and she needed someone she trusted to be executor in the event of a sudden transition. A stability move, she called it, and I was the one man she thought could keep everything in place if the ground started to move. I filed the paperwork. I read the clauses. I understood every line of the trust, including the one no one ever looks at Section 5. Subpoint B. Breach of fiduciary image resulting in reputational loss may trigger a temporary freeze pending internal investigation. She'd initialed it herself. I still had the original draft with her thumbprint on it. She had no idea what she'd handed me. She just wanted to feel safe. And Logan? Logan just gave me a reason to use it. See, this wasn't about jealousy. It wasn't even about pride. It was about architecture. Foundations. Weak points. The moment someone tells you exactly where they think you're weakest, they usually reveal where they are. He thought estate law meant irrelevance. What it actually meant. Power. Real power doesn't make noise. It doesn't need to. He clapped me on the back before stumbling off. No hard feelings, Paul. You'll always be part of the story. I watched him disappear into the crowd. His confidence wasn't just misplaced, it was suicidal. Because in that moment, something clicked. Not rage. Not sadness. A switch. I walked out early, passed the valet at 20, sat in my car and started mapping it out. I wasn't going to scream at Rachel. I wasn't going to confront Logan. That's not how this ends. It ends with receipts. It ends with silence. It ends when he walks into a meeting expecting applause and finds a termination letter instead. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through my notes. I had everything I needed. Dates, inconsistencies, expense reports, even a corporate card charge at the same hotel where Rachel had forgotten her charger. That part had annoyed me at the time. Now, it was the crack in the facade. One more thing. That night, I called in a favor from an old colleague. Someone in internal compliance who owed me for something I buried 10 years ago. Told him I had a question about Section 4.3 of the Executive Conduct Handbook. He paused. Paul, that section is reputation risk. Why are you asking about that? No reason, I said. Just brushing up on the classics. He laughed nervously. Are you back in the game? I never left. Logan had no idea, but the wire had already been tripped. And he was about to learn what happens when the man you mock turns out to be the one who wrote the evacuation protocol. We met at a quiet Italian spot near Midtown, the kind with white tablecloths and no background music, just enough clinking silverware to make anything said between bites feel confidential. I'd called it a friendly catch-up, and Dean, Rachel's firm's general counsel, seemed glad for the distraction. He was mid-50s, sharp suit, thinning hair slicked back in a way that made you think he still believed he could slow time if he looked expensive enough. Paul, he said, standing to shake my hand. Long time no see. Dean, I replied, smiling. You look like a man who hasn't missed a board call in 5 years. He chuckled, motioned me to sit. What's on your mind? Please tell me you're consulting again. We need more adults in the room. Just staying curious, I said. Doing some light reading here and there. Actually came across some legacy documents from Westbrook's early compliance days. Thought I'd pick your brain on a few. He raised an eyebrow but nodded. Fire away. I opened my leather folio, not a laptop, not an iPad. Something tactile. Something that said, I still know how to handle a file when it matters. Inside was a curated spread of notes. Flagged policy sections, outdated donor flowcharts, a few old contracts I knew he'd helped draft in the firm's early expansion. I let him skim them, let him relax. Then I slid over a page printed with just one highlighted paragraph. Executive conduct, I said, tapping the header. Section 4.3. Ring a bell. Dean took one look and froze mid-chew. Reputation risk, he murmured. I nodded. Outdated clause, maybe. Or not. He cleared his throat. It's not widely cited. It's more of a safeguard, technically. Sure. But interesting wording, I said, letting my tone hover just above casual. I noticed it includes non-financial triggers, public perception, internal optics, even interdepartmental conflicts of interest. Seems broad. He set down his fork. You're not planning anything, are you? I smiled. Dean, I'm retired. I plan brunches and dentist appointments. He didn't smile back, just leaned back, lips tightening into a thoughtful line. I continued. You know, I always admired how Westbrook protected its image. The donor programs, the social initiatives. Would be a shame if anyone jeopardized that. Even unintentionally. Now he stared. Paul, is this about Rachel? That was the first time anyone else said it out loud. I tilted my head. Dean, I came here to ask a question about a policy. That's all. He didn't believe me, and that was exactly the point. Because Dean, despite his polished veneer, was exactly the kind of lawyer who responded to whispers better than fire alarms. He wouldn't go to HR, not yet. He wouldn't call Rachel. What he'd do is what all general counsels do when they smell gas. He'd quietly pull the paperwork, review logs, look for anything that might compromise the firm's insulation from scandal. Not because he wanted to help me, because he needed to protect them. And Logan? He was the open flame dancing over the whole thing. Dean glanced down at the page again, rereading the clause. There's been no formal complaint, he said carefully. Of course not, I replied. Just something to be aware of. For the firm's sake. He folded the page and slid it into his briefcase without asking. That was all I needed. Lunch ended politely. We shook hands again. I said something about catching up at the next alumni fundraiser. He agreed, but his eyes didn't match his smile anymore. By the time I was back in my car, I knew what I just set in motion. Not a storm. Not an explosion. Something better. A compliance review. It wouldn't come tomorrow. Or even this week. But internal counsel doesn't let things like Section 4.3 hang in the wind. They'd start poking. Quietly. Pull a few email chains. Review executive expenses. Look at off-site meetings. And what would they find? Rachel's schedule, suddenly full of late-night strategy dinners. Logan's company card, with repeated charges at venues a little too elegant for budget discussions. A few surveillance videos from events showing physical contact just a touch too personal. None of it illegal. All of it damaging. The next day, I received a calendar invite forwarded from someone in legal, anonymous reviewer training session. Executive image management. A subtle sign. The wheels had begun to turn. Rachel didn't mention anything over dinner that night. But she was quiet. Checked her phone more than usual. Once, she looked at me and opened her mouth like she wanted to ask something. Then closed it. I just passed the salt. Smiled. Said, "Everything okay at work?" She blinked. "Yeah." "Why?" "No reason," I said. "Just staying curious." Rachel tried to frame it as casual. "It's just a little team dinner," she said, breezing past me in the kitchen with that clipped, sing-song tone she used when she wanted something to feel smaller than it was. Logan's been under pressure. I thought we could all just decompress. "Of course," I said, flipping a steak on the grill. "Always happy to host." She paused. "Really?" I smiled. "What kind of husband would I be if I didn't support your work husband?" She didn't respond, just offered a stiff laugh and went back to garnishing the salad with a little too much concentration. I set the table with care. Cloth napkins. Crystal glasses we hadn't used since her mother's birthday. Logan arrived 10 minutes late, wearing a too-tight blazer and holding a bottle of red like it was a peace offering. "Sorry. Got caught up reviewing the Donnelly proposal," he said, kissing Rachel on the cheek, then glancing at me like he was still trying to figure out if I had a pulse. "Not a problem," I said, taking the wine. "Hope you brought your appetite. We're celebrating tonight." He blinked. "Celebrating what?" "You'll see," I said. "Let's eat first." Dinner started light. Logan did most of the talking, rattling off jargon and fake humility like a man who just watched a TED Talk on charisma. Rachel soaked it up, laughing a little too hard, nodding like a cheerleader at tryouts. I played the host. Quiet, attentive, nodding at all the right moments, refilling glasses just before they emptied. About halfway through the meal, after the plates were cleared and Logan was 2 glasses in, I excused myself. Returned a moment later with my laptop. "Before dessert," I said, placing it gently on the table, "I thought we could go over a few numbers." Rachel blinked. "What?" I turned the screen toward Logan. "This is from the internal reporting system. I still have guest access, thanks to my trust work for the donor program. Didn't mean to snoop, just came across something strange." Logan leaned in, squinting. His name, his signature. A client dinner listed under charity advisory from 2 weeks ago. Rachel's eyes narrowed. "What's the issue?" I tapped the line item. "This restaurant, the Stag and Crown. They don't open for charity bookings. Private venue. Minimum $3,000 table, no exceptions. Also, this was the same night as the supposed strategy session you told me about." Rachel shifted. I turned to Logan. "You expensed it under outreach development. Care to explain?" His face didn't fall. It froze. Like every nerve in his smug little skull was trying to load a response that wouldn't incriminate him. There were clients. "Names?" I asked. "I'd have to check." "Sure. And while you're at it, maybe explain the double billing. That same night appears again under transport services for another $800. Strange, considering your Uber history shows a single pickup to a hotel." Rachel's fork hit her plate with a clink. "I don't know what this is," Logan said, shifting in his seat. "But dragging up internal reports at dinner? That's not exactly." "What?" I asked. "Professional? Ethical?" Rachel stared at me. "Paul, why are you doing this?" I looked at her for the first time all night. Really looked. "You invited this man into our home, into our marriage. You let him treat this house like an extension of his ego. So I thought we should clear the air." Logan stood up. "This is harassment. You can't." "Sit," I said. He did, because what he didn't realize is that I'd already shared these discrepancies with someone far less polite. Dean, the general counsel. I hadn't needed to accuse anyone. I just asked questions. Raised flags. Let the systems do the work. The email trail I'd followed showed 3 backdated approvals, 1 suspiciously edited memo, and a pattern of expense padding that could be explained once, but not 4 times. Rachel looked between us, her mouth opening and closing without words. Finally, she muttered, "You planned this." "No," I said. "You planned this. You just didn't think I'd ever read the receipts." The silence that followed wasn't just awkward. It was surgical, like a room inhaling before the incision. Logan stood again, this time slower. "I should go. Probably smart," I said. "While you still have a job." Rachel walked him to the door in silence. When she came back, I was already collecting the plates. She stood there, arms folded. "Do you enjoy humiliating me?" "No," I said calmly. "But I do enjoy watching liars panic when the lights come on." She didn't speak after that. Just went upstairs. Closed the bedroom door with a soft click that sounded like a verdict. I stayed up. Cleaned the kitchen. Closed my laptop. Logan had crossed the line. Now it was time to let the firm decide what that meant. It didn't happen with a bang. No dramatic boardroom scene, no loud accusations over speakerphone. It started with a calendar change. Logan's name disappeared from the weekly planning meetings. His Slack status flipped to away. Rachel's phone buzzed during breakfast, and I watched her face stiffen as she read the sender line. She didn't eat after that. By noon, the news started trickling in. HR had launched an internal compliance probe discreetly for now. But there's no such thing as discreet in a company where gossip moves faster than Wi-Fi. Rachel came home early that day. I was in the garage, oiling the hinges on an old toolbox I'd been meaning to fix for months. I heard the garage door open, her heels clicking toward me, slower than usual. When she stepped into view, her makeup was still perfect, but her voice cracked like glass. "They put him on leave." I didn't look up. "Him who?" She didn't answer that. Didn't need to. Instead, she walked straight to the workbench and put her hands down flat like she was holding on to something invisible. "They said." HR said someone flagged expense discrepancies. "And emails." Now I looked at her. "Emails?" Her voice dropped. "Between me and Logan. I swear they weren't Paul, they weren't that. Just casual. Nothing romantic." "Nothing romantic doesn't mean nothing inappropriate," I said. She took a breath, shaky. "I didn't know. No one said anything was wrong. They don't tell you when you're walking into a review, I replied. That's the point. Then the part that really hit her. They put me on leave, too. Now I turned fully toward her. That's so? She nodded once. Slowly. Just, while they review. They said my name came up enough that it might reflect poorly. It's protocol. I let the silence grow roots. Finally, she whispered it. Like it was a prayer she didn't believe in. What did you do? I wiped my hands with an old rag, set it down, and looked her in the eyes. Nothing, I said. I just asked the right person the right question. Her face twisted. Confusion, hurt, fear, all slamming into each other behind her eyes. For a second, I thought she might yell. She didn't. Instead, she sat on the concrete step, hands trembling. You ruined him, she said softly. I crouched beside the toolbox again. Logan ruined himself. I just stopped cleaning up after him. She didn't reply. Later that night, after she locked herself in the bedroom with a bottle of wine and her laptop, I got a ping from an old colleague in operations compliance. Just a single line. Your guy really thought nobody would notice? Amateur hour. Attached was a screenshot from internal access logs. Logan had submitted expense corrections 2 hours after being informed of the investigation. And one of the receipts? Dated the same night he'd been at our house with Rachel. They were sloppy, casual, entitled. That's what gets people caught. Not malice. Mediocrity. I printed the screenshot and filed it. The next morning, Rachel came downstairs looking like she hadn't slept. She wore a hoodie and joggers. Clothes she hadn't put on since our anniversary trip 2 years ago, when she still made space for us. They're having a meeting, she said. About me. Who's they? Legal. HR. Communications. Someone said my presence in the emails creates implied endorsement. I poured her coffee, set it on the counter. It does. She rubbed her temples. I wasn't even doing anything. I shrugged. That's kind of the issue, isn't it? That day, she didn't leave the house. She spent it in the guest room on calls, pacing in socks, voice alternating between clipped and cracking. I didn't interrupt. I just waited, because it was already moving. The firm had initiated a Tier 2 conduct review. Code 4? You're not fired, but we're preparing the scaffolding. And Logan? Word was his email archive had been forwarded to external counsel. That's not a probe. That's a digital exorcism. Rachel didn't ask how I knew. She didn't have to, but I saw the shift in her. This wasn't embarrassment anymore. This was fear. Not just fear of losing her job. Fear of realizing that she'd bet her professional image on a man who thought CYA meant clearing his browser history. And I just kept tightening bolts on that old toolbox. Because in a system built on image, all it takes is one loose screw for the whole lid to fall off. It arrived in a plain envelope. No return address. Just a corporate logo sticker slapped on the seal like someone wanted plausible deniability with a side of flair. No note. No explanation. Just a flash drive. Dropped into the inbox of Westbrook's legal department on a rainy Tuesday morning. Dean called me that evening, his voice tight. You didn't send it, right? I didn't ask what. I knew. I'm not in the habit of mailing things I can deliver in person, I said calmly. He exhaled. Then someone else decided to escalate. The footage wasn't from a hidden camera. Nothing clandestine. Just the event's standard security reel. Angle from the northeast corner of the rooftop bar, time-stamped, archived like every other function they'd hosted. Easily forgotten. Until it wasn't. The clip ran just under 7 minutes. Logan, in his element, 3 glasses of Cabernet in, surrounded by 2 marketing interns and someone from partnerships. He was leaning back against the railing, arms flailing slightly, drunk on ego and wine. You don't get it? He slurred, pointing a finger toward the skyline like it owed him something. I'm untouchable now. The interns laughed nervously. I mean it, he continued, sloshing his drink a little. Rachel's got my back. She needs me. Half those client renewals? Me. He dropped into a mock voice. Oh, Logan, you're a risk. He laughed. Please, I've got a damn safety net. Then he leaned in conspiratorially. You know who's got it rough? That husband of hers. Paul or Pete or whatever his name is. Guy just stood there all night like a damn fossil. More laughter. Real this time. Retired men shouldn't be at work events, man, Logan added. It's sad. Like dragging your dad to prom. That's where the clip ended. It wasn't the first time Logan had run his mouth. But this was different. It wasn't locker room banter. It wasn't flirty emails or suspicious expense reports. It was proof. Recorded arrogance. Confirmation that he believed he could violate the firm's ethics policy because his colleague, my wife, would protect him. Dean didn't wait for the board to finish coffee. Logan's termination letter was hand-delivered by security at 9:03 a.m. the next morning. Rachel told me in a whisper, her voice still raw from crying. They fired him. Just like that. He didn't even get a hearing. They don't give hearings to people who admit to conflicts of interest on camera, I replied. She looked at me differently then. Not with anger. Not even accusation. Just confusion. Like she was still trying to solve a puzzle where all the pieces looked familiar but the picture kept changing. How did they get that video? She asked finally. I raised my eyebrows. I imagine someone found it. Interesting. She paused. It had to be someone internal. Maybe. You're not saying anything. I'm just listening. Because that's what Logan never did. He filled silence with bravado. He mistook noise for leverage. He thought being loud was the same as being secure. The interns didn't defend him. The partnerships guy said he didn't remember the conversation, but now that you mention it, yeah, Logan had said some weird stuff lately. HR didn't need more. The footage did the job. The irony? He never should have touched the footage archive. I know he did 3 days before his suspension. He'd logged into the internal directory to review marketing material. A harmless justification. But that folder was locked for a reason. He thought he could curate his own version of the truth. But the file? The one he didn't delete? That was the one they played in the conference room. The fallout was immediate. His access was revoked. Laptop confiscated. Badge deactivated. And Rachel? They moved her to pending review. Not suspension, not termination, but something quieter. Limbo. Which, in a firm like Westbrook, might as well be exile. That night, as I watched her stare out the kitchen window, I noticed something I hadn't seen in years. She looked small. Not humbled. Cornered. And I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I didn't even speak. Because the thing about fossils? They don't move. But they outlast everything. She burst into the room like a storm that had been waiting too long to break. I was in the study, not pretending to read, actually reading. A legal memoir of all things. Something about fiduciary duty and ethical loopholes. I barely heard her footsteps. But the way she slammed the door behind her? That was deliberate. You planned this? She said, not yelling, spitting. Each word carved from fury she'd been bottling since HR froze her projects and colleagues stopped returning her calls. I didn't look up immediately. I turned the page. Let the silence stretch. She stepped closer, breath sharp, hands clenched. You planned this. From the beginning. I set the book down. No, I said. I prepared for it. She scoffed. Oh, don't play semantic games with me. You sat there in our home, next to me while I was being crucified at work. You said nothing. I said nothing because I didn't need to. You're disgusting. I nodded, slowly. That's one theory. She crossed her arms like she was bracing for a gust of wind. Why didn't legal back me? Why didn't anyone from compliance speak up? Dean knew the context. He knew those emails were just shorthand. He knew the dinners weren't personal. I stood, walked to the filing cabinet she never touched. The one she used to joke was your little war room. Opened the second drawer. Pulled the folder I'd labeled 3 years ago. Back when she was still wearing my watch around the house and asking if I'd picked up almond milk on the way back from the gym. I handed it to her. What's this? History, I said. She flipped it open. Dozens of pages. Documentation. Email printouts. Logs of travel requests. Printed chat export. But the last sheet is the one that made her breath hitch. It was her signature. Dated. Notarized. Next to a clause she didn't remember signing. She read it aloud, her voice barely audible. Trustee authority granted to Paul Granger for administration of restricted RSUs and proxy privileges in the event of fiduciary conflict or executive ethics investigation. She looked up, pale. This isn't enforceable. It is, I said. We had it verified. You insisted on it, remember? You were afraid the firm might get acquired. You wanted someone you trusted holding the reins if the board tried to force early liquidation. She blinked. But I never thought that it would be used against you? I asked. No. You thought you'd be the one holding the match. She dropped the folder on the desk like it burned her. So you're the reason legal didn't back me? No. I'm the reason they stayed silent. Her voice cracked. You really hate me that much? I sighed, walked to the window. I don't hate you, Rachel. I just stopped assuming you were on my team. She didn't speak. Just stood there, breathing like she'd run up a hill. You said I was paranoid, I continued. Said I was bored and projecting. That I couldn't handle your success. All while propping up a man-child who thought receipts didn't apply to him. She turned away, arms still folded, shoulders tight. He was just noise, I said. You were the system that protected him. That gave him credibility. You made him possible. She walked toward the door, then paused. What are you going to do now? I shrugged. Nothing. She looked confused. What do you mean, nothing? I already did it. She stared at me for a moment, then picked up the folder again, held it tighter this time, walked out of the room without another word. Not even the soft click of the door muted the sound of her breathing. She thought I was the fossil. She forgot I built the sediment around her. One line at a time, and all I'd done was read it back. The shareholder session was scheduled for 8 a.m. sharp, just like it had been every quarter for the last decade. Same conference hall, same coffee that tasted like cardboard, same badge scanners manned by interns trying not to look hungover. The only difference this time was that I wasn't on the outside looking in. When I stepped through the door, the room paused. Not completely, but just enough. The kind of shift you feel in the air when someone walks in wearing a different story than the last time they were seen. A few people nodded. Most didn't recognize me. That was the point. I wore a charcoal suit. Tailored, understated, nothing flashy. The folder I carried wasn't leather. It was plastic. Generic. But inside were 17 voting proxies, signed by silent partners who'd spent years watching Rachel's team spiral into performative vanity while the actual structure underneath quietly cracked. People she never saw as a threat. People who never raised their voices. People like me. I took a seat in the third row. Not too close to the board table, but not far enough to be irrelevant. I nodded at Dean when our eyes met. He blinked, then nodded back, the kind of nod that says you really did it. The meeting began with the usual fluff. Market updates, PR wins, sustainability metrics. Then came the real agenda. Item 6. Executive restructuring recommendations. The chair cleared his throat. In light of recent compliance reviews and reputational damage stemming from non-financial misconduct tied to expense fraud and internal email protocol violations, the board has completed its review of leadership alignment moving into Q4 and beyond. He didn't look at Rachel when he said it. That job fell to the younger VP beside him. A man who used to fawn over her every marketing idea like she'd rewritten the laws of branding. Now he read the resolution like it was a traffic report. Effective immediately, Rachel Granger's position as strategic lead on client retention is dissolved. Her eligibility for board committee nominations is suspended pending ethics review. There was no applause, just the awkward shuffle of pens being put down, water being sipped, eyes avoiding other eyes. Rachel sat stiffly at the end of the executive table, dressed in blue power color, clean lines trying to signal confidence. But her jaw was tight, and one hand kept fluttering over her blazer button, like she couldn't decide whether to hold it closed or tear it off. She stood. Excuse me, but there hasn't been any formal reprimand. I haven't been charged with anything. This is retaliatory. The chair cleared his throat again. This is procedural. And who even initiated this? She snapped. Because I know the timing, and it's not a coincidence. I stood, calmly, held up the folder. 17 partners, I said, all concerned about reputational stability, all within their rights to redirect proxy votes under Clause 14.3b. Someone 2 rows behind me actually said, damn, under their breath. Rachel turned to look at me. You don't even have equity in the firm. I smiled. Not directly, but trusts do. Her face crumpled for a moment before tightening into something harder. You've been orchestrating this. I tilted my head. I've been protecting my investments. Same as anyone else here. The board didn't vote. They didn't need to. The proxies were valid. The chair just nodded and moved to the next item on the agenda like she hadn't even spoken. Rachel sat back down. But she didn't speak again. Not even when the meeting adjourned and everyone started to mill around, pretending to check their phones to avoid awkward conversations. She didn't move, just stared straight ahead, blinking slowly. Dean passed by me on the way out. That was precise. I nodded. Was never about speed. Rachel finally stood, 30 minutes after the room emptied. She walked past me like I was furniture. But just before reaching the door, she turned. "They're going to forget you again, Paul. Just like before." I looked her in the eye. "No," I said. "They'll forget you. I was never here for the spotlight. I was here for the foundation. And foundations? They remember everything." The ballroom hadn't changed. Same chandeliers, same overpriced floral arrangements, same scent of citrus polish on wood that hadn't been refinished in 20 years. The band was still too loud. The waitstaff still too polite. But the guest list? That was different. There were new faces now. Young executives in rented tuxedos trying to look like they belonged. Old names replaced with trendier titles. And yet, despite the turnover, every table had someone who'd been around long enough to remember before Westbrook got fancy. I didn't bring anyone with me. No wife on my arm. No agenda in my pocket. Just an RSVP card marked Legacy Donor, and a black suit that still fit better than most things in the room. Rachel was already there when I arrived. I saw her before she saw me. By the open bar, laughing too hard at a joke her date had made. The man beside her looked like an algorithm's idea of stability. Pressed cuffs, perfect hair, and the blank expression of someone whose job had solutions in the title. She glanced across the room and froze. Not visibly, just a subtle pause in the laugh, a half-beat delay in the sip of her drink. But I saw it. We both did. She didn't wave, didn't nod, just turned back toward her date and leaned into his shoulder like he might absorb the shift in air. Logan, of course, wasn't anywhere in sight. Last I heard, he'd taken a strategic pivot into private consulting, which meant he was offering LinkedIn webinars from a studio apartment in Jersey. His name wasn't mentioned once tonight, not even in gossip. He was a deleted file. The gala went on as they do: silent auction, honorary toasts, the usual bloated speeches. Then came the part no one listens to: acknowledgements, donor tears, historical figures who paved the way. That's when the host paused. "And tonight," she said, tapping the mic gently, "we'd like to recognize someone whose contributions to Westbrook's internal infrastructure allowed us to grow faster, cleaner, and smarter. One of the original systems engineers who helped digitize our entire legacy operation during the foundation years, before the branding, before the IPO buzz, before any of us had badges." She smiled toward the crowd. "Paul Granger." It wasn't planned. I hadn't been told. But the spotlight found me just the same. I stood. No speech. No wave. Just a slight nod. And applause. Not thunderous. Not choreographed. But real. Respectful. The kind of applause you can't buy or script. The kind given by people who know where the real bones are buried. When I sat down, I didn't look around the room. Didn't scan for reactions. But I felt her eyes on me. I turned slightly, and sure enough, Rachel was staring. Her date said something to her, tried to follow her gaze. But she didn't blink. Didn't respond. Her expression wasn't anger. Not even regret. It was understanding. For the first time, she understood. Not just what I'd done, but what I was. That I'd never needed a microphone. That the legacy she tried to rewrite had already been carved in before she'd even graduated from her marketing program. That while she was playing power games in the spotlight, I was drawing the blueprints for the building she stood in. And now I was back. Not with a speech. Not with revenge. Just with proof. I finished my drink. Declined a second. As I left, a young associate from operations caught up to me near the exit. "I didn't know you used to work here," she said. "They never talk about the old systems team." I smiled. "That's because we built it right. When it works, no one notices." She laughed politely. Didn't get it. That was fine. I stepped out into the night. No coat. No entourage. Just a man they had tried to forget. Standing quietly beneath a spotlight they didn't expect to turn on. And her? She watched me go. No words. No apology. Just silence. The kind that doesn't ask for forgiveness. The kind that knows the game is over. And the board is clear.